The world jolted awake today as news broke from one of the planet's most dangerous flashpoints. Major U.S. military action in the Strait of Hormuz, global markets in chaos, and Iran powerless to respond. In a single breathtaking sweep, the balance of power in the Middle East has shifted. What just happened isn't merely a tactical maneuver, it's a message to every rival and ally, to every oil-dependent economy, that the rules have suddenly changed and the next 48 hours could redraw the map of world power. Before dawn, a swarm of U.S. warships and advanced drones executed precision maneuvers, intercepting Iranian patrols, halting suspect tankers, and locking down shipping lanes with a level of force not seen in a generation. Satellite feeds and social media caught anxious footage of the standoff, while world leaders scrambled to reach their counterparts in Washington, Tehran, and Riyadh. Oil prices spiked instantly. Insurance costs for every tanker in the Gulf skyrocketed by the hour. Yet beneath the statistics, a deeper story unfolds. Iran's powerful Revolutionary Guard, once so bold in these waters, suddenly found themselves outmaneuvered and exposed. Whispers in Tehran reveal panic, with top commanders desperately trying to spin the night's events before word spreads to the street. Media headlines ask, is this the opening volley in a new crisis, or the surgical move that might finally force a breakthrough or a breakdown across the region? The only certainty is uncertainty. As the world watches, the Strait of Hormuz teeters on the edge, and what unfolds next could send shockwaves from energy markets to every home on the planet. Miss this, and you risk missing the story that could define the decade. The Strait of Hormuz isn't just a line on a map, it's the most vital artery for the world's energy supply. Just 21 miles wide at its narrowest, bordered by Iran to the north and the United Arab Emirates and Oman to the south, this channel is where nearly one-third of all global oil exports pass every single day. Every supertanker and cargo vessel threading these waters carries with it not just precious fuel, but the fates of economies from Tokyo to London. For decades, Hormuz has been a geopolitical tinderbox. At any moment, a single miscalculation, a stray rocket, a seized tanker, a sudden blockade can send oil prices skyrocketing and push the world economy to the brink. That's why every military and intelligence analyst pays close attention to the slightest move or misstep in these waters. In the past, the world has watched as Iran mined shipping lanes, launched attacks on tankers, and threatened to close the strait, promising disaster for anyone who interfered. U.S. warships, constantly on high alert, have clashed with Iranian patrol boats, shadowed suspicious vessels, and engaged in tense standoffs that sometimes escalated without warning. Even as energy demand grows, so too does the risk, because every nation that relies on oil, gas, or global shipping has stakes in keeping this corridor open. What's at risk if things spiral here? Beyond immediate price spikes and shipping delays, a full-blown crisis could trigger rolling blackouts, spark regional conflict, tank stock markets, and disrupt everyday life in ways most people never imagine. That's why, whenever the Strait of Hormuz heats up, the world holds its breath with peace, prosperity, and even political stability. Hanging in the balance, the Strait of Hormuz has long been defined by a relentless push and pull between Iranian ambition and American muscle. For over 4 decades, this narrow waterway has witnessed some of the world's most dangerous maritime standoffs, a chessboard where every move sends ripples through global markets and security alliances. In the 1980s, during the Iran-Iraq War, so-called tanker wars gripped the headlines. Iran mined the waters and targeted oil shipments, hoping to choke off the West's lifeline and punish its enemies. In response, the U.S. launched Operation Earnest Will, escorting Ray-flagged Kuwaiti tankers with warships and even clashing with Iranian forces after skirmishes and missile strikes. The tension escalated to direct engagements, including the downing of an Iranian airliner, a deadly reminder of how mistakes here can spark tragedy. Even after a shaky peace, the threats didn't disappear. In the 2000s and 2010 seconds, Iran repeatedly tested the limits, boarding foreign tankers, launching harassment attacks on Saudi and Western ships, and conducting missile drills along the strait. Each time, Washington responded with new deployments, joint exercises, and firepower meant to deter, not just defend. Yet the fundamentals have barely changed. Iran leverages the strait as a tool of blackmail and deterrence, brandishing the threat of closure to resist Western pressure or sanctions. The U.S. continues to promise an unimpeded global commons, but every crisis proves how thin the margin for error remains. What's new? The technology is fiercer, the economic stakes higher, and the whole world more tightly bound to this vital choke point. Old flashpoints remain raw and unpredictable, making the strait a stage for confrontation as dangerous and unresolved as ever. If anything, both sides have grown more capable, less forgiving, and more willing to gamble with consequences that echo worldwide. In the early hours, the U.S. launched an operation that stunned even seasoned observers. It wasn't just a show of force, it was a calculated, multi-layered strike designed to send an unmistakable message. Elite Navy warships surged into the strait, escorted by stealth destroyers and surrounded by a protective net of drones both above and below the water's surface. Without warning, American forces intercepted multiple Iranian patrol boats, boarding and detaining crews suspected of harassing international shipping. Onlookers reported the precision and speed, no drawn-out firefights, just swift, overwhelming dominance. But the overt maneuvers masked deeper moves, intelligence sources say a cyber offensive accompanied the operation, jamming Iranian naval communications and temporarily disabling key radar installations along the coast. Satellite imagery later revealed strategic blockades. American ships positioned at chokepoints, quietly halting shadowy tankers rumored to be smuggling sanctioned oil. Even as official statements spoke of routine security, the reality was anything but normal. Oil company executives and regional allies received classified alerts shipping. Insurers were urged to recalculate risk at once, and merchant fleets were warned to prepare for reroutes or delays. In Tehran, electronic disruptions sowed confusion, slowing any potential response and highlighting just how outmatched Iranian forces had become. Mainstream headlines focused on the spectacle, but the true impact ran deeper. This wasn't just about intimidating Iran. It was about demonstrating that the U.S. can, at will, neutralize both open threats and hidden networks, all without firing a public shot. It was also a warning to other powers watching from afar. The Strait of Hormuz remains under American control, and any attempt to contest it now comes with brutal, layered costs. In just a matter of hours, Iran's long-promised control over the Strait of Hormuz evaporated, exposing deep vulnerabilities the regime had tried to conceal for years. The first blow was economic, a near-instant choke on vital oil exports, as U.S. ships enforced new shipping restrictions and intercepted sanctions, busting tankers. Tehran watched its revenue streams dwindle, just as the nation's fragile economy teetered from years of international pressure. Naval mismatch was impossible to hide. Iran's fast attack boats and aging frigates, which once patrolled the strait with impunity, suddenly found themselves hemmed in by state-of-the-art U.S. destroyers, submarines, and electronic warfare screens. Multiple Iranian commanders failed to respond in real time, their orders jammed or tracked, their options clipped before they could even react. The gulf in technology and organization was now on display for all, weakening morale from the highest ranks to the recruits on deck. Sanctions added a second layer of crisis. Already cash-starved, black market operators saw their lifelines cut as blockades isolated smugglers and seized cargoes. As prices rose overnight, basics like food and fuel grew scarce in coastal provinces, with anxious citizens lining up at stations and markets, facing shortages reminiscent of darker decades inside Iran's corridors. Of power, the sense of panic rose quickly. Elite Revolutionary Guard members traded accusations, worried about moles and leaks, while politicians fretted over how to spin this overwhelming sense of exposure. Protests flared in oil regions, with local leaders publicly demanding answers and sometimes openly blaming Tehran. The scale of the U.S. operation forced Iran into a defensive crouch, stripping away the illusion of control and revealing a regime both cornered and vulnerable. For the first time in years, Iran's threats rang hollow, and leaders inside and outside the country realized just how quickly the tables in Hormuz can turn. When the Strait of Hormuz erupts, the shockwaves are not confined to military briefings. They hit gas stations, grocery stores, and stock markets from London to Mumbai. Almost overnight, oil prices spike, adding invisible taxes to every fill-up and threatening the budgets of families already stretched thin. For commuters in Europe and Asia, the morning news of conflict across the Gulf quickly translates into higher transportation and energy bills, with no promise the pain will be over soon. Maritime insurers, seeing the U.S. flex its power and Iran flounder, jack up their rates for every vessel even entering the Gulf, forcing shipping companies to reroute tankers by thousands of miles. Supply chains strain under the pressure, causing logistical chaos and delays that ripple all the way to everyday consumers suddenly. Deliveries that once seemed routine are hit by new delays, shortages, and surprise price jumps. Ports from Rotterdam to Singapore brace for disruption, as empty docks and idled ships reflect the cost of geopolitical tension no headline can properly measure. For small businesses, uncertainty skyrockets. For major economies, officials scramble to tap reserves or calm markets, knowing their people expect solutions. In the Gulf itself, regular Iranians feel a sudden squeeze. Lines form at gas stations as rumors of rationing circulate. Fishermen, truckers, and traders all wonder if their livelihoods are next on the line, while families worry about access to food, fuel, and medicine. Global anxiety is amplified by a relentless media cycle, fueling debate, fear, and speculation. This is how a showdown thousands of miles away becomes personal, reminding everyone just how connected today's world really is, and how quickly the consequences of a distant move in Hormuz come home to roost. The Strait of Hormuz is now racing against the clock, each tick carrying the world closer to a breaking point. In just 72 hours, key OPEC members are set to convene an emergency meeting, a gathering with the power to shift global oil prices overnight. Markets everywhere hold their breath, waiting to see if supplies will tighten, or if backchannels can calm the panic. For shipping giants, insurance coverage is set to expire within days, forcing a crucial decision: reroute entire fleets at enormous cost, or risk the unthinkable by staying the course through the world's most dangerous waterway. Sanctions deadlines also loom. In less than a week, a new round of American restrictions on Iranian energy exports will activate, promising to restrict Tehran's vital cash flow even further. Every hour of diplomatic silence between capitals raises the odds of desperate action. Will Iran retaliate before its leverage evaporates? Or will it gamble on restraint in hopes that global outcry might force Washington into negotiation? Meanwhile, military planners brace for the next round of U.S. naval exercises, drills that signal strength but could easily spiral if a single skirmish erupts. Diplomats warn that even a minor miscalculation could trigger a firefight in the narrow strait, drawing in allies and adversaries alike and plunging the region into chaos. The clock refuses to pause. Each approaching deadline, the OPEC summit, sanctions trigger, naval maneuvers raises the stakes higher, shrinking the margin for error to nearly nothing. The choices made in the coming days will determine whether this remains a diplomatic standoff or becomes a crisis that rocks the global order. If you tune out now, you might just miss the flashpoint the world will remember for decades. The U.S. move in the Strait of Hormuz sent out shockwaves far beyond the Gulf, triggering ripple effects that few predicted. As Iran's grip weakened, other regional rivals like Saudi Arabia and the Way saw an opening to tighten security with Western backing, forging new military pacts and intelligence-sharing arrangements that alter the power balance in the entire Middle East. China, ever vigilant for opportunity, quietly accelerated deals with non-Gulf suppliers, while deploying naval assets to signal its own interests in keeping trade routes open. In the shadowy backchannels of global finance, energy traders scrambled to exploit volatility. Some nations benefited from oil price spikes, but others, especially poorer, import-dependent countries, saw budgets collapse and political unrest ignite. Suddenly, nations in Africa and Southeast Asia found themselves paying forest and off thousands of miles away. Perhaps most alarming is the terror threat that surged as Iran's proxies, unable to retaliate directly in the Gulf, targeted Western assets elsewhere. Cyber attacks, sabotage plots, and escalation from Yemen or Syria. Intelligence services in Europe and North America shifted to high alert, bracing for blowback in places that had felt far from Hormuz. Global markets reeled. Stock exchanges from New York to Tokyo plunged and rallied in wild swings, reflecting both fear and opportunism. Supply chain disruptions forced corporations to overhaul entire logistics networks, seeding reluctance about future investment in vulnerable shipping regions. The biggest surprise? The crisis redrew alliances and threats in ways nobody had planned, transforming what started as a U.S.-Iran standoff into a global scramble where energy, security, and economic futures are all suddenly and unpredictably on the line. With the world's eyes fixed on the strait, the next moves could shape history. Some experts warn that Iran, boxed in and humiliated, may gamble everything on a dramatic retaliation, perhaps a swarm attack on a U.S. ship, a missile strike on Gulf infrastructure, or a new push by proxy forces. The logic: only a bold move can restore lost credibility and deter further American dominance. Yet every hour of hesitation makes that scenario less likely as Iran's resources strain and internal doubts multiply. Others argue the bigger risk is a global energy crisis. As uncertainty lingers, traders fear even rumors of disruption could send oil prices skyrocketing, plunging economies into inflation, shortages, and unrest from Europe to Asia. For leaders in vulnerable countries, the margin for error has vanished. The wrong signal now could spark protests or topple fragile governments. Can diplomacy break the spiral? A handful of signals: OPEC emergency talks, back-channel messages through mediators offer hope that common interests in stability might override escalation. Yet trust is thin. Each side waits for the other to blink first, knowing a misstep could ignite the very chaos everyone claims to want to avoid. The final, darkest scenario sees events spinning out of control. Terror attacks, accidental clashes, or cyber sabotage could snowball before cooler heads intervene. In this setting, small mistakes become global crises, turning the Strait of Hormuz from a geopolitical chessboard into the world's newest flashpoint. This moment is suspense-defined. Every scenario carries peril, none offers clear escape, and the stakes are nothing less than the future of the world's energy and security. The clock is ticking, and what's next remains unresolved. The Strait of Hormuz stands at the edge of crisis, its fate tied to the choices made in the coming days. Every development here will ripple across the world, shaping energy, security, and so much more. This story is far from over. Subscribe now and turn on notifications so you never miss an urgent update, because tomorrow's headlines may be written in these very waters. Stay alert, stay informed, and get ready for what's coming next.